Loki season 2. We have a lot to unpack, and who else would I talk to it about besides these two lovely gentlemen, Bonebridger and John Automates? So happy to have you here. I know that another Marvel product has come out recently this weekend, and I have to say that Loki season 2 is much better than that. So
by leaps and bounds and leagues and miles and kilometers.
I think we can agree on that.
Yes. And I feel like I want to start off by talking about the overall quality of this series. I feel like, there's been so many different Marvel shows, and this one in particular, I feel like the quality from, the production design to the storytelling to the caliber of actors they have, I think it's just an overall just higher elevated show. And I love the production design a lot, and I really want to just touch upon this because I remember when I was streaming with you guys and we actually looked at the trailer initially together on one of those streams, and it feels like that like Wes Anderson type of aesthetic. And I love the tones of the greens and the oranges and the symmetry. And I think that the little things hidden throughout the offices and just like the attention to detail is what I really appreciate with this. Mm-hmm. And how do you guys feel about like the overall aesthetic and kind of how it kind of differs? Because I feel like it differs greatly from what we normally get from Marvel, which is kind of just your typical let's get it out there superhero type of storytelling.
I think that probably my two biggest things in the show that I really liked, and I definitely have a few criticisms, but the thing I liked is someone clearly sat down and said, okay, I want this to be a show that's very contained in terms of set pieces. We're going to use like 4 locations, maybe like a random little one here or there, but it's going to be very familiar. You're going to get used to it being in this one area, and we're going to let the actors act. And that's my favorite part about this is the acting in this show is top notch. I would even say it's incredibly better than season 1. Like I don't know if that's just story. Characters were used better, in my opinion, especially the Loki characters are done drastically different season 1 to season 2. I'm not the biggest fan of season 1. Season 2, especially the last 2 episodes, were a lot better for me, but the acting I was able to connect with, the characters I cared about for finally, I was shocked. But yeah, those 2 things, especially the set pieces being contained, it actually worked.
Yeah, I think I have to say I liked season 2 a lot better than season 1. And this is coming from a person who did like season 1. But I think what we got here was a situation where it's one of the few situations where I think they actually listened to what people were looking for, what people wanted. And I think that's something that needs to happen when you do engage in writing a story. Yes, you have to tell that story, but in this particular vein, when it comes to superheroes and things like that, it's also good to kind of see what the thought process is out there for fan theories, what people might be looking for, which does happen. It used to happen all the time for earlier Marvel movies and other superhero movies. And I think Loki is it might be the only project we've had as of recent MCU that has done that.
I'm so glad you brought that up, and this is something I'm going to touch upon later when we discuss the finale. But I did find out a couple of days ago that Loki eventually in the comics, it goes from the comic of the god of mischief to the god of stories, and that's essentially someone that's incredibly powerful that can change any person in the Marvel universe's like events, and obviously with consequences. And he doesn't really understand, like, know ahead of time, like if someone's going to be like what the ramifications will be with him doing that. But he can literally just change events of all time, and I think that really plays heavily into the season finale. The first 4 episodes, which is what the critics got first, to me it was on the slower side. Some of the criticisms I personally have is I felt like, we all know that McDonald's did a sponsorship, but I felt like, there was one fan theory that felt the kid behind the counter was a young Owen Wilson and then like stuff like that. And this nothing ever came to anything that had to deal with that. I liked the characters though. I liked the Ke Huy Quan character and this overall kind of discovery of what's going on. And I really did like the time traveling to the early 1900s, or I guess it's the late 1800s. Neither here nor there with Jonathan Majors' character. What do you guys feel like? Because I know Bumberger, you even said earlier, like I feel like there is a difference between the first 4 episodes and 5 and 6.
I feel like pacing, that first episode is the worst episode in my opinion, or maybe the second worst. And it's because of that pacing. You could have started the first episode with 15 minutes left, got the same result, accomplished the same stuff, and got us into the story a little bit faster. Maybe this show shouldn't have been 6 episodes. Maybe it was supposed to be 4, and Marvel was like, we can't have 4 episodes. You have to do 6. And so they added a bunch of stuff in, because you could make a strong argument that you could take 5 minutes from the first 2 episodes each and then just watch the last 4 and get the same exact. I mean, the story doesn't change. The last 2 episodes is really all you need for the story, which is, I mean, that's a lot of going around in a circle maybe. And that's part of this story. I don't know about you guys. It also makes me wonder. The reason I like Loki season 2 is it basically undoes Loki. Loki season 1 doesn't really matter. In fact, a lot of stuff doesn't matter if you look at Loki season 2 and the way they did things like that. I don't think that's good outside of the Loki world. I think that's really bad that they did that time loop type thing. But for Loki season 2, it made me like Loki's story, which is weird because the pacing was so rough those first 2 episodes.
I actually am on the opposite end. I think it could have been 8 episodes if you explain and go based off of the time paradox, right? And so, like, let's take episode 5, like when Loki kind of subconsciously learns that he's actually been controlling the time slipping. That's been happening all along without really realizing it. But you're now doing like this almost bootstrap paradox thing where it's like, well, Loki was always supposed to get here because Loki is the reason that Loki is in this position in the first place. And so when you start doing that, you're like, all right, that works. It's cool. But it could also be an easy cop out. And so it's like a weird thing where I think had you done something to focus a little bit more on that aspect and really kind of drive home how this is really affecting not just Loki, but because this is supposed to be connected. And I know I've been on both of your channels saying like, yeah, this is something that should kind of stand on its own. But if it is supposed to be connected, utilize the time paradox thing to really drive home some points to use it as a bridge. And that didn't happen. And so, yes, I agree that the first 2 episodes, you don't really need them. But I also think the reason for that is because they didn't really explain the stuff that they could have, which led to a lot of people being confused when it came to season 2. But nevertheless, I do like where they went. I still stick with the same thing, even after seeing the finale. As a Loki story, it's fantastic. But as anything else, I just don't see it as much, at least.
Yeah, so I think it being self-contained and not being self-contained, because we were all kind of debating that the past few weeks. I think, and I feel like there's still a debate for it now, because if you look at the end, and spoilers, so if you haven't watched it, don't watch this video. If you look at the end, my first thought was, this is the easiest way to get rid of Jonathan Majors as Kang if they need to.
Yes.
It also lends itself though to, keeping him in the story if needed as well. And I felt like I think the reason why the last 2 episodes really stuck out for me were besides the artistic direction, like I absolutely loved how in episode 5 when Sylvie goes into the record store and she puts on the music, and then like all the entire record store is just getting obliterated, and you're seeing that what you once thought was like, oh well, these timelines are safe, they're not. I think that Loki's arc really came to fruition in those last 2 episodes. And he became more of a real person, because I think in the first couple of episodes, he was kind of like a facade of himself, or like a shell of himself. And that was just really with the writing, but that wasn't the strongest for him, and focused on other characters. But those last 2 episodes were really, really well thought out. And I agree with both of your takes on this, that it could have been a 4-episode season, or it could have been an 8. And I think that there was that confusion involved for sure. What are some of the things that stood out for you guys specifically with episode 5 and 6?
So 6 for me is my favorite episode of the season. And I think the reason why is we stay with Loki for that first 26, 27 minutes. It is Loki's show. It is all about him. He is having to do the whole thing. It's like finally Marvel was like, all right, well, the show's called Loki. It should be about Loki. Like these Marvel is notorious for naming something Hawkeye, and it's a Kate Bishop show. And I don't even dislike Kate Bishop, but I'm here for Hawkeye.
Yeah.
Side character, main character. And I really liked that we got to be with Loki as maybe he completed his journey of becoming a hero finally. Like he's finally in that hero mindset of do whatever it takes. And I like that we see that. Where it kind of where it hit the wall for me, and I couldn't just look at this as Loki anymore, was when he's spending centuries and decades to do the things, and it's literally like doing something tens of thousands of times. I can't help but look back at Marvel as a whole and be like, this is the problem with time travel, these things. The common fan, thank goodness they don't need to see Loki season 2, or they're done. I think they're completely done. I mean, that's just my take. But if you're not like deep into Marvel, which I'm thankful they did this for people like that. But there's it's good news that 10 million people didn't watch this, because 6 million might walk away and never come back. Other than that, I really like it, other than the time problem.
I like the time aspect. How it's explained is where things can get kind of off the rails. So I agree with that. It's, you have certain parts where, for example, when Kang kind of, Victor Timely, if you will, kind of realizes like, oh, Loki has these kinds of powers, and vice versa. And there's a moment where depending on how you want to debate, or if you care about theories or things like that, you're wondering, well, does Loki influence how Kang is supposed to be in the future, or is it vice versa? Is it that Kang always knew because Loki was always going to happen because of what He Who Remains kind of predicted in season 1, right? And so you have all of these different theories, which are fun. I think those are great. And in some cases they're expanded upon, but there are also the level of confusion, like I said before, like it could just create such a level of confusion when it comes to, well, what exactly is happening here? That in some cases, yeah, I could see people being like, I don't get it, right? Look at something like Tenet, for example, where this show heavily borrows certain themes from Tenet, Christopher Nolan, and people loved Christopher Nolan to the point where everybody was giving that movie a chance. But what happened? Half the audience was like, I don't really know what this is, and kind of walked away from it. Whereas you have the other half who are like going over all of these theories and things like that. And this show gives off that same similar vibe. One thing I absolutely do think is great is that Loki, the level of selfishness and character development to kind of mitigate the selfishness that he has is one of the best things I think that happens for the character. Becoming a little bit more altruistic, realizing that, oh, I have way more control, way more power than even I might have thought I had, and how that matters moving forward, especially with the Earth 616 storyline and things like that. Loki, it does make me question, how long is Loki here to stay? Tom Hiddleston's Loki, and how much of a factor will he play in the future? Because the way it seems is almost as if he's becoming the Beyonder, or something along that like higher power, higher plane type of deal. And I wonder how that affects things moving forward. But I do like the character development that got him to that in the first place.
Yeah, and I think to to both of your arguments there, I think with the whole time thing, it's funny, Bombadre, like I feel like you said if people are invested and they did watch this, they would be done. I also feel like if someone had never seen anything Marvel before and they watched this, they would love it. You know, it's like one of those things because of it being so different with how they deal with time everywhere else. And then, yes, and I have to say, I really did like, you know, yes, when he keeps coming back and it's centuries or whatever, I thought the comedic writing there was really good. I think him showing up again and like interacting with everyone and kind of like already knowing what they're going to say and then like how they dealt with that, I thought that was really fun, which kind of you needed a little bit of a comedic break at a certain point because it is very heavy in both 5 and 6. And I did love the fact that we got to see Kang again from the first season, because that was my favorite Kang, obviously, that we've seen so far. And he felt a little bit different to me than the way he was portrayed in the first season, but I know it's supposed to be the same one. And then him being like, oh, I knew this was going to happen all along and all that stuff. Moving forward, you know, Loki is one of the most popular characters. Progressing forward, we still don't know what they're doing. I know you both saw the Marvels and I have not, so I don't even know if that even hints to what the future is yet. Not
in the way that Loki.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So ideally, since you guys have seen the Marvels and you've seen the ending, because I do really like that he gets to sacrifice himself in a way. He's not killing himself, but he now has a greater sense of purpose. And that does tie into to what I learned about his storyline in the comics, that now he is kind of he has the power to have control over everyone's timeline, which is really interesting, and he's the one holding it all together there. So if you guys were going to kind of like predict or what you would like to see happen, because I feel like either way, this show provides a much better entrance or direction forward for the MCU than the Marvels does. How would you guys like to see that interacting with?
I love this because there's two parts to this that really are frustrating for me. Is the Marvels ending and the after credit scene compared to the Loki ending is a travesty. I mean, it's a disaster. Like, shouldn't have happened. They shouldn't have even tried to tease future in the Marvels. They should have said, this is a disaster. Let's leave it alone. Like, don't do the after credit scene, whatever. Especially if they knew the same night Loki was going to have this ending, because it's at least open-ended where you could have a what happens next conversation. But we know the Marvels is going straight into Deadpool 3 now, and that's not in a good way, not in an exciting way. The CGI that they use in the after credit scene for the Marvels, if that's the future of Marvel, it's bad. Like this is going to be a low tier.
Loki looks better.
Loki looks so much better. Loki is also serious. That's the biggest, like, it was a serious show. It took itself seriously. Like you said, Nerdy Film Girl, the comedy was done well, not overboard. And in this last episode, it was very light and scattered. It was like, let's be serious. But the hardest thing for me to realize, at the end of Loki season 2, I'm very confident of one thing, is we saw Victor Timely. We saw Kang the Conqueror and Ant-Man, and they both were, for me, a little bit of a letdown. Getting to see He Who Remains Kang was like, this is what we needed. And I feel like we'll never get it. Like that's like a closed door. I feel like I felt closure, but I was like, they left so much on the table because he is a great actor. And the version that is He Who Remains is the villain they needed, that is charismatic.
Yeah.
And the other versions just didn't work for me. I hope, I don't know what's going to happen, but I feel like it's done. I feel like we never see Jonathan Majors Kang again. That might just be me. I felt like that was the end.
That is a good point. I am going to approach this from a different angle. And Nerdy Film Girl, you might agree. Seeing what Loki has become and seeing how he's been treated and the story that he has gotten makes me more and more angry at what Thor became with Taika and how that story ended up being.
Yeah.
And because you literally have a situation where Loki was kind of treated as like the naive, foolish person who was a little bit more of the comedic act right up until Ragnarok. And then it flipped. And it was one of those things where like now Thor is this like weird comedic act where he has no sense, even though he is supposed to have been growing. He has no sense, and it continues, and it's just a comedic, ridiculous character. And Loki, meanwhile, is becoming literally the god of stories or the god of time, depending on if you're a comic reader or MCU. So if this is the case, and Loki is supposed to be, and remember, this is the same MCU, same Marvel that wants Thor, Chris Hemsworth, to come back. And Chris Hemsworth is very, very popular as Thor, even though he's doing a killer job over at Netflix with Extraction, and he might only just want to do that these days. That being said, he has said, Chris Hemsworth, he's been on the record saying, if I come back as Thor, I want to change. I do not want to be this Thor we see, which means if they can give him a level of respect that they have given Loki in terms of the story, if Loki becomes the god of stories, then Thor should come back as All-Father at this point. We already saw the Odin death, which was an actual emotional scene, one of the best scenes of Ragnarok for sure, right before Hela shows up. Loki's in that scene as well. Let Thor come back and let him regain some of that seriousness that we saw from the first two movies. That's the number one point there. Also, Loki sacrificing himself here, quote unquote, is much better than Monica Rambeau sacrificing, quote unquote, herself in the Marvels. And they kind of do the exact same thing. The sacrifices and the reasons for are different, but there is the quote unquote sacrifice. But Loki could do so much more to push the story than what the Marvels can do. But the problem is, I think a lot of people are going to start to look at Loki as, this was fun, and I'm going to treat Loki season 1 and season 2 like I've treated Guardians. Because remember, when we saw Guardians 3, when people weren't thinking that's going to complete the future of Marvel or bridge anything, everybody just saw it to see it as its own thing. And I think Loki season 2 might end up having the same effect.
Yeah, I do agree with the whole thing you pointed out with Thor and what they did to that character. And like I've heard people have criticisms of Loki's character now, and I just feel like his character arc and his change of position was very organic and natural. Like it didn't just come out of nowhere to me. And I still feel like he's still the same person, but he just had a lot of more of an introspective journey and reflecting on a lot of things. So yeah, I can see what you guys are both saying with this. I hope either way moving forward that Marvel and Kevin Feige and Disney can recognize what they have done with the Loki series as a whole. Like, I know it's not perfect, but my goodness, I mean, compared to the films, it is like
it's so much better.
Yeah, you know, and I think that they should really pay attention to that. I even love the fact that when it opened, it had like the mirror effect, or it was backwards with the opening credits for Marvel. I thought that was really fun. Like it's like, oh my God, people actually cared that made this, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have any last notes about this, but you know, feel free.
My biggest takeaway, and we've known this for a while, is the people in charge at Marvel have lost their minds. If you watch Loki season 2 and you put the Marvels out on the same day and you had that ending within a few hours, you get the Loki season 2 ending. I don't know who I would have released. The Marvels was supposed to come out 2 years ago. They'd have been better off to just get it over with 2 years ago, not had that post-credit scene at all, had it be the disaster it was. And then if the only thing coming out right now was Loki season 2, we would be in a different place. But I hate to say it, no one's going to care that Loki season 2 wasn't terrible. The Marvels is going to engulf the entire world of PR. I mean, some fans will care. Like, yes, if you're watching this, you probably care like we do. But for the sake of the future of Marvel, that Marvel's dark storm cloud is going to be overwhelming.
Yeah, that's a shame though, because
it is.
Yeah.
Bad work shouldn't overtake good work, but that seemingly is what it's going to be. and there's a level of, you can see where they are trying to make certain elements. And this is one of the biggest problems with Disney in general. When you try to have this connecting thing, there are points throughout the Loki, I mean, through all episodes, but specifically Loki season 2, there are points where you can kind of see where they're trying to make it connect to something that's bigger. And they didn't necessarily have to, but they are trying to. And the things that they do make a lot more sense and are a lot better narratively than the things that we're getting from these big budget crazy movies. And to watch Loki compared to the Marvels is night and day. To watch Loki compared to season, or the season of Secret Invasion, I should say, is completely night and day. I mean, those are, and Secret Invasion was supposed to be the serious thing that really kind of helped stem the tide, and Loki is way better than that. So it's kind of a shame that projects like that overtake what Loki is. But honestly, what can you say? It's kind of like they did it to themselves. And you would hope that Kevin Feige and executives at Marvel would look at something like Loki and look at what that character can be. And if you can just be a little bit more patient and a little bit more forthcoming with your writing and how things can work together, that you can get something good. I just don't see it. I don't think they will. And I'm curious if, like Nerdy Film World, like you said, if the Jonathan Majors thing is truly over and they just decide to go into Secret Wars rather than the Kang Dynasty, or if they are going to do the thing that they like to do in certain cases, which is for any future movie or show, they will reference something that happened in Loki season 2 to kind of help bridge that gap. I don't think that happens for the Marvels. I do think that's possible that happens for Loki, because there's enough things that happen that are major where it would matter.
I agree with you. And I think, people can swallow a 6-episode season, if they apparently, like, let's say we get a trailer for something next year that looks incredible, and kind of the word of mouth is, oh, we really should watch Loki season 2 before this movie. I think people would be on board with that if people get excited again, and their brand changes. So either way, thank you guys so much for joining me today, and we're going to be talking about the Marvels actually as well in an upcoming video. Thanks so much, Bumberger and John Automates. Their links will be in the description down below. And thanks for stopping by.